The World Cup is taking place in Qatar later on this month. A couple of weeks ago, Qatari officials stopped a protest by British LGBT plus rights campaigner Peter Tatchell, arrested and detained on the curbside. Delighted to say that Peter joins us live on the line today. Peter, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us this morning. Can you just tell us a little bit about why you went to Qatar for this controversial World Cup, and what were you trying to highlight?
Well, of course, the Qatar regime wants the World Cup to pass off focused on sport. In fact, it is using sport to burnish its international image and reputation. So for Qatar, this is a big PR exercise. And I felt it was really important to not let the regime get away with it, but to instead highlight some of the human rights abuses inflicted upon the Qatari people. And although the main focus of my protest was about LGBT plus rights, I was also concerned about women's rights and the rights of migrant workers. On all these three issues, Qatar has a very, very bad record. And I think it's outrageous that Qatar was given the World Cup in the first place, given its abusive history and current policies.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because even the past few days, Seb Blatter, who has, so we say, a checkered reputation now, has said that he thinks it was a mistake to award Qatar the World Cup, even though he was FIFA president at the time. For those who aren't familiar with the situation, then in Qatar, what are the what are the standings? What are the do's and don'ts? We've heard several sort of pronouncements from Qatari officials saying, yes, you can enjoy the World Cup, but you must do this or you can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, basically, Qatar set down certain ground rules, but basically, in the run-up to the World Cup and during the World Cup, Qatar's aim is to project a liberal, kind, benign image to try and counter the evidence that it is an abusive police state. So they are saying, for example, that fans will be able to wave rainbow flags to signify support for the LGBT plus community. Even same-sex couples will be able to hold hands and walk in the street together. That is very different from their normal policy. And it's basically just another attempt to hoodwink the international public that things are okay. You know, this is not a normal regime. You know, for example, women in Qatar have to get permission from a male guardian in order to marry, get certain jobs, and to study and travel abroad. You know, this is a real serious infringement on women's individuality and autonomy. When it comes to LGBT plus people, you know, even someone just suspected of being gay can be subjected to police harassment and arrest in the street or while they're going about their business in a shopping mall. The police use online entrapment to via gay dating apps to lure gay men to rendezvous and then arresting them. We've had reports of honor killings where families have deemed that a person's homosexuality has brought dishonor to the family. They have murdered the family member, and it's all covered up by the authorities. There's no investigation, no perpetrator is brought to justice. For both male and female homosexuals, the maximum penalty is 3 years imprisonment, but in cases of dishonor, it can actually be increased to 7 years. On top of that, for LGBT plus Muslims in Qatar, they can, in theory, be put to death by stoning. There's actually a provision for the death penalty for LGBT plus Muslims. On top of all that, Qatar has secret gay conversion centers where LGBT plus people can be detained against their will and subjected to abusive attempts to turn them straight. Now, I met a young gay Qatari man who'd been through one of these centers. He described it as a form of, quote, psychological and religious brainwashing. He was so traumatized by the experience and by the general homophobia he had faced in Qatar that sadly, eventually, he killed himself.
And yet, If you turn on the TV on the run up to this World Cup, you will see nothing but sort of smooth PR orchestrated events. You see the adverts. Qatar, of course, there's an awful lot of money coming out of that region. They're sponsoring several of our several sports sponsors of the Barcelona Football Club at one point. Qatar Airlines. There's money flowing through. It is that money talks, and also you touched very briefly, but the migrant worker situation. I mean, shocking abuses going on there. Even passports taken away, living in barrack-like conditions if they're lucky. I mean, this really isn't, shall we say, the world party as it's supposed to be, the World Cup, because it's certainly not. There's no history of sport being there. It's not going to bring anything to the population. The only thing it's going to do is, like you said, is sports watch the administration, and we're seeing more and more of this throughout that region, with Grand Prix being awarded, rugby tournaments going there, golf tournaments going there. It's an insidious creep, isn't it, Peter?
Absolutely. It is using, as you say, the millions, the billions these small oil-rich states have to try and, deflect attention away from human rights issues, to present a very glitzy, glamorous international image. And it's shocking the way in which big celebrities like Naomi Campbell, David Beckham, Robbie Williams are going along with it. They are going to the World Cup. They're giving kudos and credibility to this regime. And I think that's really, really disgraceful that they are accepting money, millions, in some cases, millions and millions of equivalent of US dollars in order to boost up this regime.
I mean, I just had to bite my tongue when you mentioned Naomi Campbell on that one, but let's not even go there. Talk about going there. You went there, and what were your aims then? Because you went there, basically, it wasn't part of an orchestrated process. There weren't hundreds of you. It was just, if you like, just, almost a one man. Well, it was a one man demonstration. So, did you feel any trepidation going over there? And surely, Peter, I mean, if they dug around, wouldn't they have spotted you at the airport? Or did you manage to get in quite easily?
Well, I went there at the request of human rights defenders inside Qatar. They wanted me to do a protest to help shine international attention on the human rights abuses. They said, it would be very dramatic for you to go to Qatar because protests are not allowed. You may end up arrested and even doing some jail time. But if you did a protest in Qatar, it would get international media attention. And through that attention, people around the world would learn about the human rights abuses in that country. So that was the motivation for doing it, to generate awareness and a debate, to shine a light on these human rights abuses. I've got to say that I did have to use very elaborate security procedures. So, for example, I booked a ticket to Qatar on the 20th of November, the opening day of the World Cup, and put out feelers that I was planning a protest on that day. But in the meantime, a month beforehand, on the 25th of October, just gone, I booked a ticket from London to Doha and then on to Sydney. The ostensible reason was because my mother had not long died and I was going back to Australia to sort out her affairs. So I had a stopover gap of about 13 hours in Qatar. So I said I wanted just to come and spend, rather than spending it in the airport, have a little tour around the city. So I came armed with, tourist brochures and having, on my phone, I had, web history of looking at tourist sites and so on. And when I got to the airport and went through immigration, they fell for it. They thought this was a genuine, stopover, and I was just going to have a little mosey around some of the museums and galleries during the interval between my flight arriving from London and my flight departing for Sydney. But of course, I couldn't take in a placard. So what I had to do was get a colleague from my Human Rights Foundation, Peter Tatchell Foundation, Simon Harris. He flew independently and separately to Qatar with a placard hidden inside a copy of the Daily Telegraph. It's the only big newspaper left, and the only paper big enough to hide the password well. So what happened was, we arranged to meet in the Desert Rose Cafe, which is part of the Qatar National Museum, on the morning of the 25th of October. The plan was then we'd do the swap over of the placard. So Simon sat in one corner of the cafe reading the newspaper, then cast it aside on a neighbouring table, and then went to the toilet. I came across the room from where I was, picked up the newspaper, began reading it, and then put it in my bag. So that's how the placard was transferred from his baggage to mine. And then we began the protest, or I began the protest, and from a distance, Simon discreetly photographed and filmed it. It was outside the Qatar National Museum on a very, very busy main road and intersection, lots of people going past. But surprisingly, it took 35 minutes for the police and state security to arrive. And, of course, then we were put under interrogation. Well, I was put under interrogation. But they must have done a sweep of the entire area. And even though Simon was quite a distance away, he was spotted. They went and grabbed his mobile phone, deleted all the photos and videos of the protest. But fortunately, he'd managed to upload some before they did that. Then we were both held on the pavement. We weren't taken to a prison cell or, handcuffed. We were just required to stay on the pavement while they interrogated us. And we were not allowed to leave.
Well, I mean, how were they? Because, you're doing a protest. It's banned. This is a Middle Eastern police state. They won't know who you are. If I see you in the street, I'd go, that's Peter Tatchell. But these people presumably don't know who you are. And you're not going to say, do you know who I am, as you're being arrested? So you must have been some trepidation as they came towards you, surely, Peter?
Oh, there was, yeah. I mean, people who do protests sometimes get beaten up and mostly get locked up. So I was very fearful of that. But I just thought, well, I've got to do something to highlight these human rights abuses, and this is what is necessary, and this is what will achieve the result. In the end, it was very clear that the authorities did not know what to do with me. Their English and French was very poor, so they did some of the messages were sent to me on WhatsApp or Google Translate, and it was clear that they sent me a message saying, this is an illegal protest. This is prohibited. This is not permitted. This is a very serious offence. You can be in big trouble. So I was obviously, shaking. I was very, very nervous, and so was Simon. We didn't know what was going to happen to us. But in the end, state security officials who were basically directing the police, they were on their mobile phones all the time, and I presume they contacted higher ups in the Qatari regime, who said that it's best if they just let us go and send us to the airport because they don't want an international incident. They don't want the bad publicity of me being roughed up or locked up. That's what happened. After 49 minutes, we were free to go, but to go to the airport and go on a plane. I got to say that as I went through immigration and security at Doha Airport, I was still very nervous because I thought maybe between us being released on the pavement and getting to the airport, that maybe higher ups may have countermanded the decision to release us, and that we could, even at that late stage, still be grabbed and ended up in a police cell or prison.
Well, thankfully you weren't. I mean, you could argue, well, that was a one-man protest. What difference is that going to make? But I'm sitting in a studio in Spain talking to you over there in the UK, so it does make a difference. And is it not slightly tongue-in-cheek or slightly ironic that at a time when there are gay and lesbian footballers and others, who are plying their trade and are going to be scared to publicly come out. It's a big debate at the moment, and yet, the showpiece of the World Cup, as I said before, the World Party is something that's supposed to bring us together in a world gone crazy. Sport's supposed to be the one thing that unites us all, and this World Cup, and I've said it on air several times, I have absolutely no interest in this World Cup because of the human rights record of Qatar and the disruption it's going to cause and the sham that it is. Yeah, I mean, as I said, Qatar should have never been given the hosting of the World Cup. Hosting this event is a privilege, not a right. And I think
all host countries need to go through certain basic due diligence about, their human rights record, their transparency, the way they treat the people who work on the stadiums and so on. And on that point, it's estimated that since Qatar got the World Cup in 2010, about 6,500 migrant workers have died. Many of the families are still waiting for compensation. Even today, there are migrant workers who complain of unpaid wages by unscrupulous employers, being forced to live in overcrowded slum hostels, sometimes 5 or 6 men to a bed, just to a room 8 by 10 feet, and being denied the right to change jobs to escape abusive employers. So there are still big issues for migrant workers, although there have been some improvements, but nowhere near enough.
Peter, if people want to find out more information about what you have been up to, apart from visiting galleries, obviously in the Gulf states, you mentioned the Peter Tatchell Foundation. Where can they find some more information about that and the work that you do and follow you with your campaigns and your crusades?
The website is petertatchellfoundation.org. If you go into the top right-hand corner of the homepage, you'll find a little button which says Join Us. If you give us your email address, we will send you a weekly bulletin on a range of LGBT plus and other human rights issues. Mostly very serious, but we always try and put in a funny, quirky one as well to make you laugh. It's totally free. There's no charge, no subscription. Just give us your email address. That's all, and we'll send you the bulletin. And
I just want to congratulate you, because obviously that whole thing about, the irony of taking it in the Daily Telegraph for a start, one of the most conservative papers there is out there, and that whole John le Carré thing of the paper job in the Desert Rose Cafe is. You should make a mini series out of that, Peter. I think.
Yeah, I did take some of the ideas from tricks I'd learned about when I was reading spy novels. Yeah.
Well, congratulations on that. Peter, it's been great to have you back on the show. Great to talk to you. Peter Tatchell, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.